In this video, I want to share something with you that completely changed my life. For years, I was a cold, skeptical man, closed off to anything that even resembled faith. But all of that began to crumble on the day when, inside my own classroom, I ridiculed a student for believing in miracles. That very same night, something inexplicable happened. Something that challenged everything I believed, or rather, everything I refused to believe. What you're about to hear is not a theory nor a fable. It is the true account of an encounter that pulled me from the abyss and placed me back into life. If you believe that stories like this can touch other people, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on the bell so you don't miss any new videos. Leave your like, it really helps spread these messages. And tell me in the comments below what city or country you're watching us from. It's always moving to see how far these stories are reaching. May this story speak to your heart. I never believed in miracles. Never. My name is Edward Lancaster, and for over 20 years I was a full-time biology professor at a public university in Texas. Known among the students as Professor Ice, I wore that nickname with pride. Science was my only altar, and any mention of faith or divinity was, at the very least, mocked by me. This skeptical stance didn't appear out of nowhere. It was born on the day my son, Joshua, just 8 years old, died in my arms after a 3-year battle with a degenerative disease. I begged God every day to trade my life for his. When I realized no one was listening, I buried my faith in the same coffin. Since then, every cell in my body began to reject any idea that there is something beyond matter. And that's how I lived. Until that night. That afternoon, it all started with a simple interruption in class. I was talking about genetic mutations and the capacity of science to explain the improbable, when I heard a student whisper something about her grandmother being healed after praying to the Virgin Mary. I stopped the lecture right there. The blood rushed to my head, but I maintained my usual cynical pose. I ridiculed the girl in front of everyone, made a joke about her faith, and challenged the logic behind the supposed miracle. The auditorium fell silent. I could feel the discomfort in the air, but I had grown used to that kind of environment. But on that night, alone in my office, something happened. Something I still can't explain. As I was grading papers, the atmosphere began to change. First, it was the heat, not from the air conditioning. It was another kind of warmth, as if someone were embracing me from the inside. Then, the smell. A strong, inexplicable scent of fresh roses, even though I was locked inside, in the middle of an empty building. And then, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. At first I thought I was tired, perhaps a reaction of my body to accumulated stress. But that wasn't it. I knew my body. I knew the effects of sleep deprivation and mental exhaustion. This was different. It was as if time had stopped inside that room. The air grew thicker but not suffocating. There was something, or someone, there. I got up from my chair, pushed the papers aside, and started looking for a logical explanation. A gas leak, some floral-scented cleaning product, perhaps a forgotten vase left by a janitor, but nothing, absolutely nothing justified what was happening. It was then that I turned towards the door and felt the hair on my arms stand up completely. There was no sound at all. None. Not the noise of the ventilation ducts, nor the creak of the wood, nor footsteps in the hallway. Just that loaded silence, as if the world were holding its breath. And then I saw her. I don't know how to describe this without sounding like I've lost my mind, but she was there standing in the middle of the room. A woman. Real. Not a shadow, not an illusion, not a figment of my imagination. She wore a deep blue mantle, which seemed to glow softly as if illuminated by a light that came from nowhere. Her face was young, yet at the same time seemed ancient, as if she carried centuries of stories in her eyes. I froze. My legs wouldn't respond, my throat closed up. I tried blinking several times, thinking it was some projection, a momentary hallucination. But it wasn't. She was looking straight at me. Not with judgment, not with anger, but with a compassion so intense that I wanted to collapse right there, like a child who finally finds the lap they have been searching for years. My whole body began to tremble. I, the skeptic, the staunch atheist, was standing before something my mind simply couldn't dismantle. She didn't say a word, not one, but I swear I felt as if she was telling me everything I needed to hear without opening her mouth. Her eyes pierced through me in a way no one else ever had. It was as if she saw not only who I was on the outside, that rigid, sarcastic and cold professor, but who I was on the inside. A broken man, carrying guilt, bitterness, fear, and above all, pain. A pain that I myself had already given up on trying to heal. For a moment I thought I was going to faint. My legs gave out and I sat back down in the chair, only this time with trembling hands, a hot face, and a racing heart. I never imagined that silence could be so deafening. But it was. Because in that silence, I felt everything I had refused to feel for 20 years. The loss, the grief, the suffocated love, the longing for Joshua. She took a few steps towards me with a lightness that didn't seem human, and it was at that instant that I realized she was crying. There were tears in her eyes, tears that weren't streaming down, but were there, shining, as if she were suffering with me. That broke me down. As much as I tried to maintain control, I couldn't. The tears I had suppressed for 2 decades simply came all at once. I cried like a boy, without shame, without barriers. I cried for my son. I cried for my ex-wife. I cried for all the years I spent denying everything, isolating myself, mocking others for believing in something that I deep down wanted to believe myself, but was afraid to. Her presence didn't scare me. Quite the opposite. It was as if every one of my tears was being embraced. I can't explain how, but it was as if she had come just for me, as if heaven had sent a mother to comfort a father who had lost his footing. I don't know how long it lasted. It could have been 2 minutes or 2 hours. I completely lost track of time. I just remember that she extended her hand toward me, and when her palm touched my chest, right in the center, exactly where I had felt that suffocating pain since the day Joshua left, something changed. It wasn't like an immediate relief, nor did the pain disappear. No, it was still there, but in a different way, as if someone had taken that pain and said, "You don't have to carry this alone." Her touch wasn't cold nor hot. It was human, real. It was firm, yet gentle, as if she were telling me, "You can breathe again." I began to feel as though the weight on my shoulders was slowly being redistributed, not taken away, but transformed. And it was at that moment that I saw something that leaves me speechless even today. Behind her, as if emerging from another reality, a figure appeared. It was my son, my Joshua. But he wasn't sick, nor fragile, nor pale as he was the last time I saw him. He was radiant, alive. With that little smile he always gave when he wanted to convince me to let him stay up later. It wasn't a memory. I know it wasn't. It was him, as if he were there, in that same space, next to her. Looking at me with that look that only a father understands, he said something to me. Not with his mouth, but with the same voice I hear in my dreams. He said, "Dad, don't cry anymore. I'm okay. She welcomed me when everything turned dark and never left me alone. She waited until you were ready." And when I heard that, something inside me broke. Not from pain, but from liberation. I fell to my knees on the floor, literally. The weight of it all brought me down. The pain, the emotion, the surprise. It was as if my body was finally allowing itself to feel everything that had been repressed for years. I sobbed loudly, without shame, without filter. For the first time in a long time, I was allowing myself to be weak. And on that cold university floor in the middle of the night, I felt a peace I hadn't known. It wasn't the peace of someone whose questions were answered. It was the peace of someone who understood that some questions no longer need an answer. I felt Joshua there. I felt his presence as if he were breathing the same air as me, and at the same time I felt her. That woman I could never describe justly. The way she looked at me, it was the gaze of a mother who understood exactly what it is to lose a child. No words were needed. I knew she understood everything. When I managed to compose myself, still on my knees, I looked up and she was still there, steady, serene, as if she were waiting for me to digest it all. And then, as naturally as everything else that had happened until then, she began to move away. Not walking backward, nor disappearing with a flash of light. Nothing like that. She simply turned and walked towards the door, which remained closed. But before reaching it, she looked at me again. One last look. There were no promises, no explanations, just certainty, the certainty that I was no longer alone. And then, slowly, the scent of roses faded. The room returned to normal. The silence returned to being just silence, and the presence disappeared. And I was left there, sitting on the floor, trembling, with the feeling that my entire life had just been turned upside down, and at the same time, finally, the right way up. The next morning, I barely slept. Not because I was disturbed, but because my mind wouldn't stop. I tried to rationalize, as I always did with everything, but there was no explanation that fit into logic. And for the first time, I accepted that. I accepted that perhaps not everything needs to be dissected, measured, analyzed. I returned to the university as if I were entering a completely new place. It was the same building, the same hallways, the same students, but I was different. When I entered the classroom, I saw Emma Cooper sitting in the back row, hunched over, looking down, still marked by the shame I had caused days before. That hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had made that girl feel small because of her faith, me, who the night before had been reached by the very thing I had denied my whole life. Before starting the class, I called Emma to my desk. She came slowly, wary, clearly thinking I was going to attack her again. I spoke softly, only for her to hear. I asked about her grandmother. She said she was fine, that the doctors couldn't explain the improvement, that she was home, cooking as if nothing had happened. I closed my eyes for a moment. I took a deep breath, and I apologized. Truly. For the way I treated her, for the humiliation, for the arrogance. I said, "Your faith is precious, and you shouldn't let anyone, not even someone like me, take it away from you." She was in shock. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with wide eyes, trying to understand if I was serious, and I was. I was being truer there than in any lecture I had ever given in my life. The whole class realized something was different. Even the most skeptical students noticed. My posture, my look, my way of speaking, everything had changed. And I didn't even need to say anything. They felt it. In the following days, I went back to teaching as always. The content was the same: genetics, molecular biology, evolutionary mechanisms. But my way of teaching had changed. I still demanded a lot from the students, but now I listened more carefully. When someone raised their hand to ask a question, I stopped to truly listen. I didn't answer with sarcasm. I didn't cut them off with that typical arrogance. And when someone mentioned something spiritual, even tentatively, I respected it. Not because I had suddenly become religious, but because now I knew that there is something beyond what we can see and measure. And when the class asked me if I was okay, I just smiled. It was a sincere smile, one that almost no one there had ever seen on my face, because deep down, for the first time in many years, I was okay. At home, changes also began to happen, small at first. I put a plant in the window, then another. I replaced the cold lamps with warmer light. And one day, without even thinking much about it, I opened the drawer where I kept Joshua's photos, the same ones I hadn't been able to look at since the burial. I took one out and put it in a frame on the shelf. It was a simple photo, him in his favorite blue shirt, smiling as he always did. I sat on the couch and stared at that photo for a good few minutes. I didn't cry, not this time. I just gave thanks in silence. And that same night, I bought a small image of the Virgin Mary and placed it next to his photo. Not because someone told me to, not out of automatic devotion, but because now I knew she had been with me, that she took care of my son when I couldn't, and that, in some way, she was still taking care of me. A few weeks later, I worked up the courage to call Sarah, my ex-wife. It was a short but sincere call. I apologized. I said everything I had never been able to say, that she was an incredible mother, that I admired her strength during Joshua's illness, and that I was wrong to have distanced myself so much. It hurt to admit it, but I needed to do it. She listened in silence. In the end, she said she also missed what we had before the tragedy. We didn't talk about getting back together or anything, but it was as if a wound that had been open for 20 years had finally started to heal. And that gave me a relief that no therapy, no escape into work, no biology textbook had provided me. It was as if things were, little by little, returning to their place, or finally going where they always should have gone. At the university, rumors started to circulate. Some said I had found religion. Others thought I had gone through a nervous breakdown. But most simply commented that Professor Ice had become human. The older students noticed the difference. The new ones only knew me as someone more approachable, more patient. One day a student waited for me at the end of class to ask what had happened. I thought about inventing something, a vague answer, but I ended up telling her. Not everything. I just said that one night something made me understand that there are things science doesn't explain, and that this didn't make me less of a scientist, just more human. She was silent, nodded her head and said, "That explains the way you look at us now." I didn't ask what she meant by that, but I understood. It was the same look I received that night. The look of someone who sees you whole, with all your flaws, and still remains there. As the months passed, my house stopped being an empty place. I still live alone, but now there is life here. The plants grew. There are smells of fresh coffee in the morning. Sometimes I put on quiet music while grading papers, something I would never have done before. And every day before going to sleep I talk to Joshua. I don't know if he hears me, but I talk. I talk as if he were there, lying in the room next door, waiting for me to finish work. His photo remains in the same place, and next to it, the image of the Virgin. I don't touch it. I don't perform rituals. I don't pray with memorized words. But I look at it, and every time I look, I remember that that night happened, and no one will convince me otherwise, because what changed in me was so profound, so real, that even if I wanted to, I couldn't pretend it was a figment of my imagination. I know my mind. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. There was one night not long ago when I woke up in the middle of the night with the room completely dark. Everything normal, nothing strange. But the air was different. I can't explain it. It was the same scent from that night. Roses, soft but present. I lay there quiet, just feeling it. And then that feeling came over me again, that I wasn't alone. There was no visible presence, nothing like the other time. But it was as if she were there, just reminding me, I'm still here. It didn't last more than a few minutes, but it was enough to make me smile in the dark. And then I whispered, "Thank you." After that, the scent vanished. I fell back asleep like a child. The next day I went on with life. I graded papers, I taught class. I ate lunch in the same cafeteria as always. But with that silent certainty inside me, I didn't dream it. That whole thing was real, and in some way I can't explain, it still is. Every now and then someone asks me why I don't tell this story publicly, why I don't write an article, give a lecture, or participate in some testimony program. The truth is, I don't know. I don't think I was chosen, nor do I think I'm special. I also don't want to turn this into a spectacle. The only thing I know is that it happened, and that it transformed who I was. That alone makes it all worthwhile. I prefer to share this story like this, in my own way, with those who truly want to hear, or rather with those who need to hear. Because perhaps someone out there is experiencing the same kind of emptiness I lived through. Perhaps they are clinging to pain, pride, or the need to have all the answers. And perhaps that person just needs to know that there is another side. That even in the midst of the deepest skepticism, grace can find a way to enter. I haven't stopped being a scientist. I continue studying, researching, teaching with the same enthusiasm as before, perhaps even more. But now when I reach the limit of explanation, when I realize there is a point where logic stops and mystery begins, I respect that space. Before, I treated that limit with contempt. Now I treat it with humility. I no longer try to fill every void with arguments. I accept the silence. I accept the mystery. And most importantly, I accept that faith and reason don't have to fight all the time. They can walk together. It's not a dispute. It's just a more complete way of looking at life. When a student raises a question about spirituality, I no longer run away. I listen. And sometimes if I realize they are lost in the same way I was, I just say, "You don't need to understand everything now, but keep searching." Because sometimes it's precisely when you stop looking with your eyes that something finds you. I never had an apparition like that again. I never saw her face in front of me again, nor did I hear Joshua's voice in that way. But that doesn't frustrate me, because deep down, what happened that night was enough to change the rest of my life. And even today, every now and then, that peace returns. It might be in the middle of a class, when I see a student smiling after understanding a difficult concept. It might be when I'm washing dishes and listening to a song Joshua liked, or even when I'm alone in silence, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea in my hand. At those times, that presence strikes again. Not physical, not visible, but real. A serene, silent, firm certainty. She is still near, and more importantly, he is too. I don't know how the time or space where they are works. I just know it's not the end, and knowing that is enough. There was a time when a colleague from the department, a staunch atheist, came to ask me if I had really changed my mind about everything. He was direct. "Do you believe in miracles now, Edward?" And I was silent for a few seconds before answering. Then I said, "I don't know if believe is the right word, but I know I saw. And those who have seen no longer need to believe, only to remember." He looked at me with a confused expression, partly skeptical, partly uncomfortable. And I didn't press it. I didn't try to convince him, because I know that what I experienced is not something that can be proven in an equation. It's something that pierces you, that changes the way you see the world without needing anyone's authorization. And that's why I'm telling this story, not to prove anything, but to say that, yes, it is possible, that even the hardest hearts can be touched, and that sometimes it all begins when you allow yourself to listen, even if it's just the silence. Today, I keep the image of the Virgin Mary in the same place, next to Joshua's photo. Not as a religious altar symbol, but as a silent reminder of what I experienced. Sometimes people who visit my house, few because I don't entertain much, ask about her. Some think I've become devout. Others, that I'm going through some phase. I just smile and let them think whatever they want. I know what happened, and that's enough. I have no need to convince anyone. Most of the people who most need to hear this kind of story won't believe it immediately. And that's okay. Because if someone had told me this 5 years ago, I would have laughed too. I would have ridiculed it, deconstructed it, challenged it. And perhaps that's why she chose to appear precisely to me. Because when someone like me is reached, it cannot be ignored. If you asked me today what I learned from all of this, I wouldn't be able to summarize it. But one thing is clear. Love never disappears. It can hide. It can be silent for a while. It can even be mistaken for pain. But it doesn't die. I still miss my son every day. But now that longing no longer eats away at me, it accompanies me. And that presence I felt that night, that woman, that mother, showed me that there is something beyond what we can understand. Something that doesn't need to be explained to make sense. I don't know if it was a vision, an apparition, a grace. I only know that it was real. And sometimes when the night is very silent and the scent of roses invades the air without warning, I'm not startled. I just close my eyes, breathe deeply and whisper softly, "I know you are here." I never told this story in class. I never turned it into a sermon or a lecture. But sometimes when a student is going through something difficult, I notice. There are looks that betray pain. And then, without saying much, I sit next to them, listen, and if it's the right moment, I share just a part of what I experienced. Not all the details, just enough so that person knows there is hope, even when everything seems to be falling apart. And almost always after those conversations, I see something change in that person's eyes. A lightness, a good doubt, an openness, and that's enough. I don't need followers or applause. I just want what I lived through to serve as a reminder to someone, somewhere in this world, that love doesn't give up on us, and that sometimes, even after years of silence, it speaks again, in the most unexpected way possible. To this day, I can't explain why it happened to me. I don't consider myself more special than anyone else. I've made too many mistakes, hurt people, drifted away from what truly matters. But perhaps that's exactly why it happened. Maybe she does come for the most lost, the most closed off, the ones who have already buried their faith and thrown away the key. And when I think about it, a strange peace comes over me, a quiet certainty, difficult to explain. I continue my life normally. I wake up early, teach class, go home, have dinner, sleep. Nothing extraordinary. But sometimes in the midst of this common daily life it happens. The perfume returns, the memory becomes a presence, and all I can do is stop, breathe, and give thanks, because I know it was real. It happened, and maybe it will never happen again. But once was enough, a single night, and it was enough to change everything. This was the night that changed everything for me, and to this day I can't explain it. I can only feel it. What did I learn from this? That even when we close all the doors, heaven finds a way to come in. That love doesn't give up, even when we give up on everything. And now I want to ask you, have you ever experienced something that no one would believe if you told them? Something that deeply marked you, that made you rethink your life or your faith? Write it here in the comments. Your story might touch someone who is in need of hope today. If this story spoke to you in some way, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because here we share stories that transform and rekindle faith. And if you want to help this channel continue to grow, but don't know how, click the Join button. It's simple, fast, and it makes all the difference so that more people can be reached. And don't leave just yet. The next recommended video for you is about to appear on the screen here. Click on it and continue with us on this journey of faith, healing, and new beginnings. Stay with God, and see you in the next video.